Bill Cosby freed as court overturns his sex assault conviction. The entertainer had been serving a 3 to 10 year sentence in a prison outside of Philadelphia. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Joe the Lawyer. I'm your host, Joe Pometto, a practicing Pittsburgh criminal defense, personal injury, and family law attorney. Here on this channel, I break down legal news like this Bill Cosby story from the perspective of a practicing attorney. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Also, check out my new channel, Tips from a Lawyer. There is a link to the channel in the description below. You'll get practical legal information. So this is the big story of the day, the past 2 days. Everybody, I think, knows what was going on with Bill Cosby, but I'm going to run through this article. I'm going to give you my analysis and opinions. I'm going to sprinkle them in as we read this article, June 30th, 2021, from the New York Times. Bill Cosby was released from prison Wednesday after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his 2018 conviction for sexual assault, a dramatic reversal in one of the first high-profile criminal trials of the Me Too era. The court's decision seemed likely to end the Pennsylvania case, legal experts said, and I would agree. And while more than 50 women across the nation have accused Mr. Cosby of sexual assault and misconduct, statutes of limitations in their cases makes further prosecutions unlikely. And even when they brought this case, the statute of limitations had expired on many of the accusers against Bill Cosby at the time. That's why it is important from a legal perspective for people to come forward if they are a victim of a crime. Mr. Cosby had served 3 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence at a maximum security prison outside Philadelphia when the court ruled that a non-prosecution agreement with a previous prosecutor meant that Mr. Cosby should not have been charged in the case. I'll be honest, you don't see those too often. Mr. Cosby, those agreements, but we'll get into them. Mr. Cosby, 83, returned to his home in suburban Philadelphia Wednesday afternoon where, looking frail and walking slowly, he was helped inside by his lawyer and a spokesman. He flashed a V sign as he reached his front door. I assume that sign was for victory. The court's decision overturned the first major criminal conviction of the Me Too era, which came soon after allegations of sexual assault had been made against the powerful Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein. The accusations and eventual conviction of Mr. Cosby stunned the nation, painting a disturbing portrait suggesting that a man who had brightened America's living rooms as a beloved father figure had been a sexual predator. And I will state that I enjoyed watching the Bill Cosby show growing up. I thought it was very funny and entertaining. The case against Mr. Cosby began with his arrest in 2015 on charges that he had drugged and sexually assaulted a woman at his home in the Philadelphia suburbs 11 years earlier. In April 2018, the jury convicted Mr. Cosby of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault against Andrea Constand, to whom Mr. Cosby had been a mentor and who was at the time a Temple University employee. Mr. Constand had praised the guilty verdict, Ms. Constand, at the time, saying truth prevails, and the National Organization for Women called it a notice to sexual predators everywhere. But Mr. Cosby's lawyers, who said at the time that allegations against Weinstein would make it difficult for them to receive a fair trial, later suggested in an appeal that the outcome had been influenced by what they described as a period of public panic. Well, whatever you think about that in the Me Too and the public panic, that played no role in the decision, the eventual decision of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And you'll see why. In a statement issued with her lawyers, Ms. Constand said Wednesday the court's ruling was not only disappointing but of concern in that it may discourage those who seek justice for sexual assault in the criminal justice system from reporting or participating in the prosecution of the assailant, or may force a victim to choose between filing either a criminal or civil action. However, the court's decision had more to do with fundamental rights of due process that are guaranteed to every person in this country than anything that it was frankly in Ms. Constands' statement. Now, she may be correct because people may interpret and perceive this decision as something that it is not. It is not a decision that weighs in any way on the merits of victims who come forward with crimes of sexual assaults. What this decision from the Supreme Court had to do with was prosecutorial misconduct. It had nothing to do with what Ms. Constands put in her statement. In their 79-page opinion, the judges wrote that a previous prosecutor's statement that Mr. Cosby would not face charges, which paved the way for Mr. Cosby to testify in a civil trial, meant that he should not have been charged in the case. It was a 6-1 ruling with 2 of the judges in the majority dissenting on the remedy, which barred a retrial. The case began in 2005 when Mr. Cosby was investigated in the case of Ms. Constands, and a former district attorney of Montgomery County said that he had given Mr. Cosby his assurance that he would not be charged in the case. The former district attorney, Bruce L. Castor Jr., who was also one of Donald Trump's defense attorneys in the second impeachment of Donald Trump, announced in a news release at the time that after an investigation he had found insufficient evidence. He later testified that he had given Mr. Cosby the assurance to encourage him to testify in a subsequent civil case brought by Ms. Constands. A civil suit she filed against Mr. Cosby was settled in 2006 for $3.38 million. In that testimony, Mr. Cosby acknowledged giving quaaludes to women he was pursuing for sex, evidence that played a key part in his trial after Mr. Castor's successors reopened the case and charged Mr. Cosby in December 2015. That was just days before the 12-year statute of limitations expired in the case. And it came amid a number of new allegations from women who brought similar accusations of drugging and sexual assault against Mr. Cosby. In light of these circumstances, the subsequent decision by successor DAs to prosecute Cosby violated Bill Cosby's due process rights, the appeals ruling said. Now, we may be disturbed by the result, okay, because I think most people agree that Mr. Cosby, he was a serial offender here, and we feel like justice is escaping us. But due process is a fundamental part of the criminal justice system. It must be upheld. It must be upheld. Let's get down here a little bit more. I'll run through the article and I'll give you some more my own personal opinion. Mr. Cosby painted a picture of himself with a fist raised above his head and his eyes closed on Twitter, writing, "I've never changed my stance nor my story. I've always maintained my innocence." Well, that's the other thing. This decision has nothing to do with whether you're innocent or guilty. It has nothing to do with that. This decision says that the prosecution proceeded in a way that violated fundamental due process rights, irregardless of guilt or innocence. Regardless of guilt or innocence. This decision is not a decision that speaks to, the victims of sexual assault. This is not a decision that says Mr. Cosby was guilty or innocent. It's a decision that says that the system, the process, must be protected. The process. And so when attorneys and judges are engaged in this process, they have to follow certain rules. And those rules being maintained are fundamental to the future credibility of the justice system. And that's why the court made the decision they did. Mr. Castor, who this year served as a lawyer for President Donald Trump during his second impeachment trial, said after the ruling was delivered on Wednesday that he believed his decision in 2005 had been exonerated by the ruling, calling the verdict a shellacking for the current district attorney's office. "I was right back in 2005 and I'm right in 2021, he said in a phone interview. "I'm proud of our Supreme Court for having the courage to make an unpopular decision." Well, I am not sure that I agree with that. I don't think this vindicates Mr. Castor. It just shows that a case shouldn't have been brought after the district attorney had obtained an inculpatory statement from the defendant and in order to help on a civil case. I was right back into Brian Perry, one of the lawyers representing Mr. Cosby, said he was thrilled with the ruling. To be honest with you, we all believe collectively that this is how the case would end. We did not think he was treated fairly, and fortunately the Supreme Court agreed. And that's what this really has to do with, whether or not Bill Cosby was treated fairly in the process. And not just Bill Cosby, that a defendant, that a person facing trial is treated fairly. Montgomery District Attorney Kevin Steele said he hoped the decision would not dampen the reporting of sexual assaults by victims. And here he goes. He was found guilty by a jury and now goes free on a procedural issue that is irrelevant to the facts of the crime. That's perfectly true, Mr. Steele. I want to commend Cosby's victim, Andrea Constands, for her bravery in coming forward and remaining steadfast throughout this long ordeal, as well as all of the other women who have shared similar experiences. Patricia Stewart, who accused Mr. Cosby of drugging and assaulting her, said she had been preparing herself for the possibility that Cosby's conviction would be overturned, but she was still a little stunned. I'm wondering what the 43-year ordeal that I went through was supposed to be about, but she said she was consoled by the fact that I believe we did the only thing we could, which is to come forward and tell the truth. He was convicted by a jury. Scott Berkowitz, the president of RAIN, we are deeply disappointed in today's ruling. This is not justice. Others express support. The decision undoes a verdict that several women said they have been assaulted or raped, had praised at the time. And Janice Dickinson, a model, told the court that Mr. Cosby raped her. Her account was one of 5 the prosecution presented from women who said he had drugged and sexually assaulted them. My heart is beating out of my chest out of the moment. This is fair and just, she said. In 2018, I am victorious. The issue of whether the trial court had improperly allowed additional women to testify was not considered because the panel had ruled that Cosby had relied to his detriment on Mr. Castor's promise and then made statements in the civil case that were effectively used as evidence against him. In a dissent, Justice Thomas G. Saylor disagreed that a statement Castor made in a news release represented an unconditional promise that bound his successor not to prosecute. Justice Stephen Doherty, in a separate opinion, in which he was joined by Justice Max Baer, found Mr. Cosby's due process rights had been violated when he relied on Mr. Castor's promise and testified in the civil case. The remedy should not have been barring further prosecution, but throwing out the evidence since the prosecution gained from Mr. Cosby's testimony. The reversal now leaves Cosby's career and reputation in limbo. Its overturning undid what many women had seen as an early success of the Me Too movement. So just to sort of break down what happened here, Bruce Castor, a prior district attorney back in 2005, essentially made a deal with Bill Cosby, made an agreement with him where he said that, listen, Mr. Cosby, I'm the prosecutor. If you agree to testify in a civil case, if you agree to give this statement in a civil case, we will not prosecute you. And Bill Cosby then gave that statement relying on the promise made by the prosecutor. Okay? And he testified in the civil case. And then when the district attorney decided to bring charges against Mr. Cosby, they used that statement against him, thereby violating their promise and violating rights, due process rights. Due process rights are rights that say that everybody has the right to a fair trial. Okay? Due process is guaranteed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights contained in the Constitution. So this decision has nothing to do with sexual assault victims. This could have happened in any case with any set of facts, okay? This is not necessary. This does not mean that Bill Cosby is innocent, nor does it mean he's guilty. A jury did find him guilty. This doesn't mean that he's innocent, and it doesn't mean that the Me Too movement is any less than it should be or has been. But what it does mean is that prosecutors need to be very careful in their dealings with defendants, not to make promises that they're not going to uphold later on. Now, an interesting tidbit in there, some of the justices said, well, this shouldn't have resulted in his conviction being vacated. They said it just should have resulted in some of the evidence not being allowed to be used against Mr. Cosby, and that there should be a retrial. But it appears that the Supreme Court has said that there will not be a retrial in this case. And I did not read the full opinion, so I could be missing out on a few things here. But, I'm an attorney. I think I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit. I can pick up enough here. But the core is a broken promise. The prosecution broke a promise, and Mr. Cosby made statements that the prosecution said they would not use against him, but then they did end up using against him. And the court basically said it's more important here that we protect the fundamental due process rights of the Constitution. Okay, that the process, the system is greater than any individual person. And for better or worse, in America, you are guaranteed certain fundamental rights by the Constitution. You are guaranteed certain fundamental rights, and those were violated here. This is not a statement on the Me Too movement or sexual assault victims or Mr. Cosby's guilt or innocence. The prosecution here, district attorneys, some lawyers screwed up. Okay, they screwed up. And unfortunately, something should have probably been done about prosecuting this man earlier. But it is what it is, and we are where we are with it. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. I'm just trying to give it to you straight, break it down so you can understand what the law is and what this decision really means. It's not saying that Bill Cosby is innocent. It's not. And the women who came forward, their testimony still helped to secure a conviction against him in the court of law. Look, victims can only do so much. They can't control every part of the process. And so if you're the victim of a sexual assault or a crime, you should come forward. You should come forward. So thank you very much for joining me. I'm Joe Pometto, Joe the Lawyer. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Also consider signing up for my other channel entitled Tips from a Lawyer, where I give practical legal information for everybody out there. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you.